I cannot stand to be under pressure. But this baby can. Let's bring her into the 20th century. Good afternoon, average homesteaders. Today we're going to spruce up an old pressure cooker. What we have here is a Presto Steamliner pressure cooker Model A. Now this girl is old, but she's a good one. You know, the old scenario, they just don't make them like they used to. In a lot of cases that's true. There are some modern pressure cookers that are made very well, but a lot of them are cheapies. This particular pressure cooker I scored at an auction for $1. Now it needs to be fixed up a little bit. It's original equipment. The pressure gauge is shot. The plug is gone. And this has the old style vent where you manually turn to release air, pressure, and whatnot. We're gonna replace this. We're gonna replace that. And we got a new gauge. Okay, homesteaders. As I said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring this old pressure canner up to the 20th century. Now, as I said before, I scored this at an auction for $1. And I have all the replacement parts already here. I ordered them, took about a week to get, but believe it or not, all the parts are obtainable. And they're not that expensive. I think I have maybe $20, $25 in the parts. So this whole entire investment is going to be $26. So what we're going to do first is we're going to, well, let's make a choice, the overpressure plug. Now there was an overpressure plug in this when I bought it, and I don't know what happened to it. It's not there. It must have got overpressured. But what I have here is two different replacement parts for the overpressure plugs. Here's standard equipment that it would have came with, and here's more of a modern version. It's got a little metal rod in the center. When the pressure builds up, it's pushed up like this, and it seals it off. It's kind of more of a visual aid to let you know that you do have pressure going, and that the pressure has happened, and basically that the pressure is still present. So I mean, if you see this up like this, you obviously wouldn't want to open your canner. It's still under pressure. But if it's dropped down like that, then it's kind of like a safety guide to let you know that the pressure is reduced. But we're going to go with this more modern one than the standard equipment. This, if I remember correctly, they're 30-pound plugs, and they're pretty simple to install. It just slips in there. You can get yourself a screwdriver or a paintbrush, as I'm using, and it goes just like that, right into place. You can see the little metal rod still moves. I would assume that you could, if you wanted to, you could put this plug in a little bit of hot water and let it soak to soften it up, to make it a little bit easier to get in and out. As you can see there, it's really not necessary. Okay, let's move on to the pressure gauge. Now some models will have a nut on the inside. This design, the gauge is just physically screwed in to the lid. No nut. Pretty easy to work with for Remember, lefty loosey, righty tighty. Okay, that gauge is off. Here's the replacement gauge. Looks like the threading is a little bit longer. These are all replacements parts from Presto. So there should be no issue whatsoever as far as their fitment goes. Now, I've seen some people put Teflon tape on the threads and some not. There's really not that much information out there on the do's and don'ts. So I'm gonna just put a little bit of Teflon tape on there. One way or another, it's not gonna hurt it. Now what you want to make sure you do is you don't try to tighten it by holding onto the gauge itself. That should be pretty self-explanatory. The gauges are pretty resilient, but they're not meant for that type of trauma. Okay, that's in place. Now the next part we're going to do is the air vent. Now this old style fits on there and you twist it to use it. That's the old school. We're not going to go with that. This very well could work fine. The vent is open. You can see daylight through it. It is clear. It should function properly. But we're going to upgrade it. Just a regular plug and a new vent. This will just basically fit right over just like that. You don't have to twist it to open it and close it. And when you start canning, you're going to have that off anyways to let it vent for 10 minutes regardless. So you don't need to be touching that. That's going to be hot anyways, and sure wouldn't be any fun to touch. All right. Okay, the old vent is off. We have the new vent. I'm going to do the same as what I did with the pressure gauge. I'm going to wrap a little Teflon tape on it. You want to make sure your threads and your holes are clear. There's no debris in there. Make sure you're threaded properly too. You don't want to cross thread. You cross thread it and then you've basically ruined it. You're going to have to rethread it. To make it work properly. By the time you start spending money on the proper tools to do that or pay somebody to do it, you might as well go out and just buy a new canner. These canners can be pretty expensive. That's why if you want to save some money and you see an old canner at a yard sale, flea market, or like myself at an auction, especially auction, you can just swoop in, and I'm not going to use the word steal, but basically you could call it that. Now that vent is open. I can see daylight through it. And this right here, that'll just rest on there like that. You don't have to worry about twisting it, opening it, close it. It just goes like that. It's a 15-pound vent cover for these. If the pressure exceeds that, it will cause it to raise up and release pressure for safety. Now, last and not least, is your lid gasket. Now, it did have one on it, but it's old. These things do deteriorate, dry rot, even if they're sitting around and not being used. Now, right here in the lid, there's a lip right through here, and your gasket will slip in there. Will slip in there just like that, and it'll go all the way around and hold it in place. Now, if you have a stubborn gasket, you can put a little bit of vegetable oil on it. It'll help it slip in easier, and it'll also help it be preserved over time and not being used. Before you start your canning season, you should pull out the gasket and clean it. Make sure there's no debris on it so you can get a good seal with your lid. Some people suggest soaking it in warm water for about 15 minutes before you put it back on. But there, simple as that. This canner came with its original tray, but I also purchased another one. If I'm doing little jars, I can double stack so I can get the most out of my canner. Okay, that's about it. This canner is old. I couldn't find the date it was manufactured, but it is better than 60 years old, easily. And it is solid. You also, if you're going to pick up an old canner, you also want to inspect the pot itself. Make sure there's no cracks. Make sure the bottom's not bowed out where it's been overpressured. Just basically take a look at it. Make sure everything's solid and it's safe. Now, after you do all this, all these things to your canner that I did right here, some places do have places where you can take your canner to and have it tested and make sure it's safe. They can check the pressure on your gauge and whatnot to make sure that you're good to go. Now, on this site right here, you can buy all the replacement parts for pretty much most canners. Here's a breakdown of 2 different types of canners provided by Presto. This can be found on the internet.